disappointing. Canada now having to wait another year for this. But joining us to talk a lot about that, here are representatives Ian Boisvert and Laura Saba coming here onto the show. So after watching that game last night, I mean, I was just sorely disappointed. I thought I would have gotten at least some sort of fight and fire out of Edmonton, but I know it's got to be feeling for everybody else all across the nation of Canada, from Winnipeg, Calgary, Montreal. I mean, they just want this curse broken so badly right now, with the fact that U.S. hockey right now, with all these teams, they're winning all these Stanley Cups, and it's like, when are we going to have ours? How did you guys feel of that? I mean, aside from just, the Oilers losing that, but now Canada's got to wait another year for this now. How did you guys react to this?
Personally, I think for Montreal Canadiens fans, it's really just about Montreal being the one to get back there, right? And I think a lot of people here were cheering for the Oilers. Like, if you went out to bars and you were at restaurants, like, you would hear the cheers for the Oilers goals and things like that. And I know there's a lot of transplants here, but not everybody in the city is a Montreal Canadiens fan. And I do think a lot of people were just cheering for the Oilers because they wanted to see McDavid win one, right? They wanted to see one of the greats have a cup, because he is truly the best player in the world right now, right? But in terms of the drought, like, I think Montreal Canadiens fans would just prefer that it be Canada again. It'd be Montreal again. But it was a very, I think it was a very telling game, in that I think the Oilers just stopped believing that they could win. And I think they stopped believing that they could win earlier than the last game, right?
Yeah.
I would say maybe in game 3, that might have been where they stopped believing it. And I understand why. It's because Florida is just stacked. They have the depth, and they seem relentless, and they seem unbeatable. And I think there's a reason for that. It's the depth up and down the lineup was just, it was hard for any team to overcome, even one such as Edmonton. There were like a few more issues with Edmonton than just not being able to get over that hump. But I really do think that the win was deserved. Like, Florida's win was deserved. They did everything they needed to do, and even more than was necessary to win.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, Ian, I got to ask, because now you guys have a coach, a former Florida player for himself, who won the Stanley Cup years ago with Lecavalier. Martin St. Louis, I'm interested in how this is going to build up for Montreal, because you're seeing him coach. You're seeing, Patrick Waugh and the Islanders. They get the number 1 overall pick, and I'm not sure exactly how that's going to end up, building up, but should be a bright future for them. But knowing St. Louis, an offensive player, and what they have with both Cole Caufield and even with Nick Suzuki, this is a duo they truthfully don't want to break up. They want to keep this relationship, but build the best players up and around them to get Montreal past the hump and hopefully back up and into the cup at some point, right?
Yeah, and I think Marty, as a head coach, is a really big part of what the Canadiens are building. Throughout the year, you would hear the players talk about how they're playing for Marty. They want to win for their coach, which, that's kind of difficult to manufacture if it's not something that comes about itself naturally. There's not a guy in an NHL locker room who Marty St. Louis can't relate to. He was undrafted. He was passed up in expansion drafts when teams could have had him for free. I think the Blue Jackets were one of those expansion years. They could have had Marty for free. But he turns himself into a Hall of Famer. He wins cups. He wins personal trophies. He can relate to anybody in that locker room. And I think that's sort of where a lot of the belief comes from, in that if you guys just listen to me, we'll be fine. I'm going to help you guys become truly great. And I think, you mentioned Cole Caufield. When Marty St. Louis brought in, Cole Caufield was struggling early on in his young career. And Marty was Cole's favorite player growing up. He used to wear 26 because he wanted to be like Marty. And he knew, that guy's small. I'm small. I can make it. And the second Marty comes in, Cole Caufield becomes the goal scorer we kind of all hoped he would be. So I like Marty's influence is not just on that one player, but that is emblematic of how valuable he is to Montreal, and how the kind of impact he can have on any one player in that locker room at any given time.
100%. Laura, this was interesting, and I was curious about this because one player in particular that was trying to find his niche, and that was Patrik Laine. Because I watched him, in his time in Winnipeg and even up in Columbus, it seemed like there were times where he would get streaky. And to be honest with you, if I'm looking for just an all-around great player up and in hockey, to me, Patrik Laine is not my personal cup of tea because I do believe there is still some of the potential that he could show. But, coming into Montreal, what was something that changed about his game that got better and what he'll continue to work on? Because it seemed like streaky years in Winnipeg and up in Columbus, he's been trying to find that comfortability and niche. So what have you seen from Patrik Laine? Oh, got the mic muted.
I'm so sorry about that. I was just gonna say it's interesting that you asked me about it because Patrik Laine is actually Ian's boy. Ian really wanted Patrik Laine in Montreal from many, many years ago. He kept talking about it, and then eventually it happened. I think it was tough for Patrik Laine because when he came back in the preseason, he had that injury, and it took him a while to get back. I think one of the things that he had to kind of change is that he was not able to rely on his own skating all that much. So you would see there were some games where it looked like he was just picking a spot to be in so that everybody else could catch up and then he could score the goal. But I think it was really due to that injury. And then he just had such bad luck in the playoffs. He had a broken hand or a broken finger. And so I feel like the one big thing that I saw in Patrik Laine was he seemed comfortable around this team. I think, it goes back to what Ian was saying with Marty. Like Marty can relate to a lot of players and can be heard. And the team embraced Patrik Laine. He was given to them as a prize by Kent Hughes, right? Like Kent Hughes was like, I wanted to reward the effort that they made and bring in somebody who could put them over the edge. And a lot of people were laughed at when they said Patrik Laine turns this team into a playoff team, and the Canadiens made the playoffs, right? And largely in part due to all the power play goals that Patrik Laine was able to score. So he was a big part, but I don't know if I can say that any part of his game improved because he had to do so much adjusting to just be able to play games this time around. And you could only really see that he was starting to feel a lot more comfortable later in the season. Like he came back. So like later in his portion of the season. And I think he got a lot of confidence at Four Nations. I think that really, really helped him a lot. But I got what we expected out of Patrik Laine this year, I think.
Yeah, it should be interesting for next year. And hopefully, if they keep adding in some good key additions to this group, I think there's going to be a bright future amongst them. An interesting conversation, though, too, is because, Carey Price, I mean, he's a well-respected goaltender in this Montreal Canadiens franchise. But we know, too, that the contract has been something that they've been working on tremendously for the last few years. So going into this off season, we know Montreal, they want to piggyback what they got off of this past season, getting into the playoffs, seeing what they've got in their core, and then find ways to, make some key additions. Ian, is there anybody in particular they've been targeting this off season that they would like to get a deal done or at least, pick up somewhere that they're comfortable with maybe giving up some picks or maybe even a player here or there?
Yeah, there hasn't been a ton of names linked to the Canadiens at this point. One of them is a defenseman out of Vegas in Nick Hague, who's a very much a stay-at-home defenseman who will help their penalty kill and sort of take on what David Savard did last year for Montreal, just sort of be that designated penalty killer, stay-at-home defenseman. It's a valuable role in the National Hockey League. Otherwise, guys wouldn't get paid to do it. So really, that's the only player that's really truly been linked to Montreal. Montreal's main get this summer, and until they get this kind of player, they're going to be after him, is a second line center. It's the big piece of the Canadiens rebuild or build as it is. Kirby Dach was penned to be that guy. He came in the first draft that this administration had. He was picked up on the draft floor, a big trade that got him to Montreal, and the player is tantalizing. 6'4" right shot center who can play like a little bit of a jerk and who has a lot of the soft skills as well. A lot of great playmaking, really good hands. Problem with him is he can't stay healthy. He blew out his knee twice in consecutive seasons. This past season, he lost it about midway through the year. The season before that, he played a game and a half and then lost the rest of the year due to a blown out knee. So, that has necessitated the Canadiens, going after a second line center. The problem is the things that they have to offer, picks and prospects, are the same thing that everybody else has to offer. You know, you had our colleague from Locked On Blackhawks on a moment ago. They're trying to move that third overall pick for help now. The Canadiens are trying to do the same thing. Utah's trying to do the same thing. Boston might be trying to do the same thing. So it's really difficult to make that move now. And Montreal's not going to make a move just for the sake of doing it. They want the right guy in there so that they can feel confident he's going to be able to play our system and play the way we want to play. So that's the big need for Montreal. I'm sure over the next week and into, you know, free agency, we'll start to get some names linked. But that's sort of what we're looking at as far as the big acquisition the Canadiens might make this summer.
A final question here for you guys. Both of you can answer this, one or the other. But the way that I'm looking at the state of the NHL is they are growing. And, you know, I watched, you know, I've watched other leagues as well. I mean, the NBA, it seemed like the season kind of got dull. There wasn't really like a whole lot that was happening until we got the Luka trade. And then all of a sudden we go all the way down to the postseason. And now the postseason is a lot more interesting. Major League Baseball, they made a bunch of tweaks with their rules. We got last year's World Series between two big franchises, Yankees and Dodgers. And so you start looking at a lot of these small market teams. How could they possibly, make it better? And then the television deals and revenue. Gary Bettman and what he's been looking at with, the future of the NHL is that they got a new TV deal with Canada. They ended up, the Four Nations tournament, by the way, was an absolute success. I was so happy that they even came out with this. I mean, watching that U.S. and Canada game, and then immediately there's fights and everything. I'm like, that is hockey right there. And so to see the success of that, and then potentially down the road, we could be seeing some expansions. What are we seeing right now and witnessing for the future of the NHL, and not only just in the States, but even for just all around the globe, and how this is going to change up even for the state of the league itself?
Yeah, I think the salary cap going up is going to change a lot. It had been a flat cap for a while because the players were paying off escrow to the owners. They had owed the owners money over the course of the pandemic, so they were paying them back. Now that escrow is paid, the cap is going to increase exponentially over the next few years, which means a lot of teams are going to have a lot of money to throw around. I was thinking about this too in terms of the Luka trade and in terms of like the Rafael Devers trade that happened this week in Major League Baseball. Those are two leagues with massive salary caps.
Yep.
And they can pay all these guys, but sometimes maybe owners just don't want to, and they don't want to continue to pay them. That's not really the case in the National Hockey League because the salaries are so low that you can kind of just eat them and it's not a big deal. And a lot of these, superstars don't get moved. I think as we start to get $15, $16 million to $20 million players, every year, we'll start to get into those situations where teams go, you know what? Like, yes, we have this guy who can be a superstar on our team, but do we really want to be paying that much for this player? So I think that's going to be part of the growth in the National Hockey League over the next little while because we don't have a lot of these trades. We don't have really a Luka moment. We don't have that Rafael Devers trade that happened this week. So I think that's part of the growth. The expansion is always big because it's just a lot of revenue for the league. I mean, we're getting $500 million price tags on these expansion franchises, and it looks like Atlanta's going to get one. And I would imagine the first opportunity they get to go back to Arizona, they're going to do it. So that's, to me, like those are just, it's a boon for the league. You don't really have to worry about the talent getting stretched too thin at this point. And I think that the league is trending in the right direction. The problem with the National Hockey League and Gary Bettman in general is how can they not screw it up? And that's lockouts, work stoppages like that. They need to avoid at all costs right now.
Yeah, 100%. Because especially with all the new money coming in, the last thing that you want to do is have a potential lockout. And I know Major League Baseball, they're not perfect themselves. And eventually they're going to have to figure that out because a lot of people have been screaming salary cap. But I don't know. To me, it's like I am trying to hold the owners accountable for some of this stuff because there's parts of it that they want to pay and parts of it they don't want to pay. But eventually you're going to want to make it better for your future of the franchises because you've got the fan bases speaking out for you. So that would be interesting, though, if it came down to the expansion, right? Atlanta, maybe the possible return of the Thrashers could be an interesting thing. Or, Arizona. I even thought about that because I'm like, I felt for Arizona fans when they left to go to Utah. And now they've got, this franchise, the Mammoth, that now I'm excited for. Great ownership, well respected. But to bring it back up in Arizona, I mean, my whole thing was Just don't give it to somebody named Alex Morello. For God's sakes, please don't. Because then it's like there's no hope from there, from top to bottom. But appreciate you guys for coming on by here up and onto the show, and to lock it on in for all of our audiences here, where people guys can find you talking everything Montreal Canadiens, because you guys now are officially busy from this off season and up and into the draft.
Yeah. You can find our podcast, honestly, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, like you're watching us right now. You'll find us all over social media at Locked On Canadiens, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, you name it, we're on there. You will find my co-host Ian Boisvert at Maybe It's Ian. You will find me at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for having us, Jake.
Absolutely. Pleasure is all mine, guys. Enjoy the off season and the rest of the week, guys. Should be an interesting one, but let's just see how competitive that it will get when moves, trade talks, all this stuff starts to come up around the corner. Appreciate you guys for coming on by. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Jake.
much.
Yep, you bet.